The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. This week's episode will be covering the GAMA Trade Show. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
I'm doing great. It's nice to see you again, Doug, after a week of traveling for the show, being a member of the media. Can't wait to hear all about GAMA. 209 episodes, and yet it's our first ever GAMA recap episode. So we're breaking new ground here on the Game Schooler Podcast.
Yeah, beautiful weather in Louisville, Kentucky, and right now it's a wintry mix outside.
Oh, that's just Wisconsin. What do you do?
Exactly. So it was great walking around with a hoodie, no coat. I wasn't a true Wisconsin boy whipping out the shorts and a tank top the second it gets to 35 degrees.
No.
I kept it normal.
That's me.
So this is going to be a very free-flowing episode. I've got a little bit of notes, but the last time that I went to GAMA, I have gone previously. It was in 2019, and it was in the apocalyptic wasteland of Reno.
Easy now.
Nevada.
We have listeners over in Nevada. Possibly used to have listeners in Reno. I know you're
Maybe.
not a fan, but I might be someday. So
Go there. We'll see. We'll compare notes when you get back. Louisville, though, I loved. It was great. It was about a 6.5 to 7 hour drive with no stops, which I did need to stop, but way less than if I had kids in the car. That was the joy of just kind of living in my thoughts while I was driving, as opposed to, are we there yet? Are we stopping for food? I need to go to the bathroom. It was pretty much gas and go.
are you a fast driver? I mean, are you a 9 over, 15 over, 14 over?
I'm usually 5 over. I'm a 5 over.
Yeah.
So
life in the middle lane, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's pretty much me. Yeah. I stay away from the extremes, Michael.
Okay.
Not too slow. My dad is slow. He's
Speed limit?
Or under, if he's determined that that's good gas mileage for his car. He'll do some research online. And Doug, if I drive at 67 miles an hour, that is the optimal gas mileage for my car. And he'll ride that the whole way.
Hey,
sometimes almost dangerously.
That's why people tune in to the Game Schooler podcast, right? We want to know about gas mileage in our families.
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
Good. That's good.
All right. So I figured I would start out with giving you the reins of if there's any questions or things that you wanted to know before I got into. My goal was to just kind of go through the publishers that I saw and just things that I observed in kind of publisher order is how my notes are laid out.
Yeah, I'm going to start with I want to avoid comparisons to other shows, and I want to lock in on what's awesome with GAMA.
That's a good question. I think what is really nice about it is without the general public there, it's professionals. It's the movers and shakers that are in the industry, and that is nice. It's nice not having to it's nice being able to talk to publishers and designers and retail store owners, you name it, as far as if you're involved in the industry, you're at GAMA. And it's nice to be able to have conversations with those folks in person without them trying to rightly sell a whole bunch of games to individuals on a convention floor.
Okay.
I think is what is the nicest thing, that there are quiet places to sit down and take notes. There are quiet places to have conversations. The exhibit hall is a great place to talk and interact with people, sometimes ones that I never would have thought to to reach out to. They just happened to be next to a booth that I was going to. And so I think that kind of calm ability to have conversations with friends and people that you've known for years and people that are new, and making those new friends without all of the commotion that comes with some other events.
Excellent. And what is GAMA? What does GAMA stand for? And just give a very elementary definition of GAMA.
So GAMA is the I always forget what the second part of it is, but the Game Manufacturers Association. GAMA.org is the website. And so let's see what they have to say as far as what the it is the Game Manufacturers Association. So I think I guess it's just the GAMA for Game Manufacturers. Who knows?
I believe the first A is A-N-D.
Game and Manufacturers Association? Could be.
Yes.
So anyway, it is the main governing, I shouldn't say governing, but it's the main trade organization for the gaming hobby. So that would encompass retailers. It would cover publishers, folks that are making the games, the manufacturers, the people that are actually printing the games from the publishers, the designers that work with the publishers, and content creators and media that cover anything in the tabletop gaming space. And so that would cover tabletop games or board games and card games, but also RPGs, and miniatures, painting, that type of thing, organization, any of those type of publishers or companies that are involved in the hobby on some level. The one thing that's not really there, which is, I guess, a pro for me, but I'm not disparaging it for anybody that enjoys this part of the hobby, but the LARPing and cosplay type of stuff is not really represented there. You also have trading card games. So, your Magic and Lorcana, things like that are also at the GAMA Trade Show as well.
Excellent. And then just some real time, the second A, just a correction to what I said last time you all heard my voice. GAMA simply is the Game Manufacturers Association. So it's not it's Game Manufacturers Association. That is GAMA.
All right.
And if you want to learn more, it goes back to 1977, where it was put in to support the Origins Game Fair. So there's some nice little history on their website. But you went, you had a great time. What do you love about? So I want to jump in on something that you and I have talked about offline, but demo nights. All right. Yeah. You said this was free flowing, so I'm just going to keep flowing here if that's all right.
Yeah.
I know you're going to do a publisher recap, but I'd love to just paint the scene because I think our audience would love to hear about a demo night. And what is it?
All right. So if you've ever been to a larger convention, such as Gen Con or any regional convention that has some sort of exhibit hall, and when you're walking through the exhibit hall, they'll have a publisher will have games set up on their table in their booth, right? And there's, maybe two of their newest games set up, depending on how big the booth is. And you can go by and you can ask the publisher about the game, and they will give you a brief synopsis of what that game is. So a demo game night that happens at a lot of these trade shows takes that and kind of expands it slightly, where you actually get to sit down at the table. You're not standing at a booth, and you can usually run through a round and actually touch the components and play and interact a little bit with the game. Is basically how a demo night or a demo game night would work. And at the GAMA Trade Show, those tables in that room were sponsored. So you had to similar to how you would get a booth at a convention, you had to buy a table at the demo game night. So some companies were there all 4 game nights. However, what they were showing may have rotated from night to night. Other companies may only have been there one night and had their one game that they wanted to play. So that was, just varied and dependent on the publisher. So you do get to be a little bit more interactive with the game as opposed to just looking at it set up on a table and kind of the demo person saying, oh, these pieces move here. A lot of times you can play around, or if it's a 10-minute game, you can play the full game.
Yeah, I'd love that. So do the 3 hours fly? Because just now I pulled up the schedule.
Yeah.
It looks like it's 8 to 11. I mean, when you're 11. In there, is time moving, or did you feel like you got to, take your time and see quite a bit of stuff in that 3-hour time period?
It's interesting because it's a little bit of both. The frustrating part sometimes with the demo game nights, and we have gone to some shows like ACD that do a really good job of moving people through tables and kind of incentivizing you to get the 1 or 2 spiel, 2-round spiel of a game. So a lot of times you're like, I really want to see that game, but these people are hunkered down to play and they're in it. And so sometimes it's like, all right, I'll mark that down and then swing by later. And sometimes the next time you go by, it's full. So sometimes it can be a little frustrating because you're not always able to sit down and take in the games that you really want to based on how the people are running those demo tables. Now, that being said, you do get a lot of great interaction. And I guess towards the end of the week, you start seeing some of the folks that bought the table 4 nights in a row and have had the same game out 4 nights in a row, where if you've seen it once, you don't need to go back. So there is a little bit of walking around what's new. All right, I've seen that. I want to see this. Is there availability for me to sit down? And you don't want to kind of just hover around and be like breathing over somebody's neck. Although at sometimes there's spots where it's like, I don't need to sit down and see this. I just want to look over somebody's shoulder and see what's going on as well. Yeah. So it's a little bit of both. Sometimes I feel there was also a media first look night, which was slightly before the first one of the demo nights, which had a very similar feel, except it was only media folks. So
I want to jump in there. Let's just pause because I have a follow-up question and then jump in right there. Podcasters oftentimes listen to other podcasters. If you have a board game podcast, I don't enjoy listening to our own podcast. I listen to a lot of other podcasts. And so I know that we have some folks who are in the podcasting industry. And that doesn't always mean that they're full-time podcasting. They have other jobs, but they do what we do, and they love creating a regular podcast. Would you recommend going to GAMA for somebody who's never been to GAMA but who is has a board game podcast?
That's a tough question. I feel like if you're not going to other conventions and don't have opportunities to meet up with publishers and kind of have a one-on-one conversation, then yes, it's certainly makes sense if it's feasible. However, it's not inexpensive. It's a hotel. You have to have a GAMA membership. Food and travel, all of those things add up. So depending on where it is, it can be quite a costly adventure that maybe a phone call and your local regional convention would suffice.
Yeah.
It's not a situation where you're necessarily going to, if you are a content creator, going to come home with a whole slew or haul of games. There's not, there was a lot of publishers that literally just had the copies in their booth and that's about it.
And you're not necessarily getting a ton of scoops, right? Because there's not a ton that's released. So if you're the reason to go to GAMA would be to build relationships and see people that are in the industry. Is that kind of what I'm?
I think so, because most of the stuff that there used to be a time where, like when I went in 2019, there was stuff that was like, and there still was some stuff this time around, but it seemed like there was more of like, this just got announced at GAMA and it's coming in Gen Con and things like that. And it was like, boom, big reveal. I think I think Z-Man or Asmodee announced the Pandemic Fall of Rome in 2019 at the GAMA Trade Show.
Good
was
pull.
Kind of a thing that there were banners up. And however, that world, we are now in a world of Kickstarter and Gen Con hype, and there is not a lot of stuff where it was like, well, I had no idea this was coming out.
Sure.
These are things that, it's going up on Kickstarter in a month, or this will be our big Gen Con release, but it's like it already has a Board Game Geek entry. So it's not like, where has this been? And maybe there were some scoops. Maybe folks like Tom Vassell and W. Eric Martin from Board Game Geek are more inclined to get some of those media scoops, as it were. But I don't think it's as much of a hobby thing as maybe it used to be.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Those are just some of my questions that I'd been saving, wanting to bring to the show. I think I want to turn it over to you, Doug. You have a lot of notes, a lot of thoughts. So where would you like the rest of this GAMA recap episode to go?
Well, I think I want to go through a little bit of what the schedule and what's kind of going on there. So I mentioned the media, the media first look, which was a hour and a half, 2 hour chunk of time where folks had tables set up of, here's what we've got coming out. And it was, there's no retailers around. It was just media. You could, take pictures. I'll try and get some pictures when I start talking about publishers up as well on the episode. Hopefully I can do that. And then throughout the days, there are various seminars going on, which a lot of them are geared towards retailers on merchandising and, things to add to their stores. And there's also publisher presentations. So, for example, I went to one for Thunderworks Games, our friend Keith, just to see what they were talking about and what they have coming up. And, in a lot of those meetings, it's, publishers working out ways that they can work directly with retailers and promotions, or what they can do to help service their game as well, or games better, what the retailers see, and whether that's demo copies for libraries or prizes and things like that, how they can make ordering more efficient, which, is irrelevant to us, but it is something that's going on in some of those presentations. Then they also have, you mentioned the demo game nights, and so those are going on Monday through Thursday, I believe. And then there is the exhibit hall, which opens on Wednesday afternoon, and then is open all day, or was open all day Thursday from 9 until 5, which is kind of the star attraction, right? There's all of the publishers, manufacturers, you name it, dice companies, all in an exhibit hall, the same way that you would have Gen Con, however, way less crowded and more time to chat and have conversations. And a lot of in our case with media, the marketing managers and the media coordinators and stuff are all tend to be there, as opposed to when you go to a Gen Con, sometimes those folks are in either off-site or completely different rooms, things like that, having meetings all day long. So that's kind of the general vibe of what you're doing. There's a little bit of free time. If you're a retailer, you're kind of jam-packed with seminars and things that you're going to. I was able to head over to the Louisville Slugger Museum for a morning and learn some. How long do you think it takes to make a professional baseball bat, Michael?
12 minutes.
And They were in full spring training making bat modes.
Yeah, 12 minutes.
48 seconds, Michael.
Whoa. You kind of set me up on that. 48 seconds, so it's all machine automated. There's no human hands.
Yes.
All right, take two. Ask me that question again.
Michael, how long does it take to make a Major League Baseball bat for a professional?
4 days.
No, 48 seconds, Michael.
Oh, wow.
How many baseball bats do you think a pro player uses in a year?
In a year, 162 games. I'm going to say 287.
It's about 120.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions you just want to ask to make me look like a fool?
No, I thought these were interesting.
Baseball was my first love. I appreciate that you sent me a picture of Andre Dawson's bat, the Hawk, the greatest right fielder of all time, the greatest player to ever walk Wrigley Field. Yeah, I didn't go there. I'm just talking baseball and players in right field. And man had a cannon and a laser on his right arm. But I'm glad you took a field trip to Louisville Slugger.
Yeah.
I do think we should jump in and talk about some games and publishers and really get it popping here. So were there any games that stood out to you or like try to get me excited about a couple of games? Are there any games you're like, oh man, you're going to like that. People are going to love to hear about that. Or are you going to go publisher rundown and just give love to all the publishers? How are you doing this, Douglas?
Yeah, I'll go through publishers and I'll make a special note of ones that I'm excited about.
I don't care as much about you as I do me here on this episode.
I know.
So,
well,
all right.
Most of those things cross over.
Good.
I think. And some of the heavy ones I didn't get to see a bunch of. So there were a couple, but I'm like, these are way too much for me.
Yeah.
Stop by the Academy Games booth. They're the publisher of Freedom, the Underground Railroad. Supposedly there's a new version maybe coming to Kickstarter that is supposedly, they've been working on it for a while. It has been...
A double supposedly means you're pretty skeptical, right?
I don't know.
So you didn't hear it from us here at the Game Schooler podcast, but there may be a new version of Freedom, the Underground Railroad at some point, Doug?
Yes. I did talk to the owner of the company. He did say that they were working on it, and the designer was in New York working with source documents in the attempt to, instead of being... Now, the thing I didn't know is if it was just a new version or an alternate in the same thing, but the idea being
that's a scoop. You got to share that. No double supposedly. You talked to the owner. He confirmed that the designer's working on it.
Yes, but I don't know if it's like just a second edition or a different game in the same universe where you will actually, instead of just kind of being nebulous players overseeing everything, you will actually take on the role of somebody on the Underground Railroad, which is going to amp up the personal level of that game, which if you go back, I'm not sure what episode we talked about that. We talked about it in the School of Gaming segment, and Michael and I were pretty impacted emotionally just playing that game as is. So adding that extra wrinkle in there is certainly something I'm intrigued about.
All the way back in episode 63, we did Machi Koro 2. It was our game of the week. Then Freedom, the Underground Railroad we covered in the School of Gaming because we didn't quite know where to handle that game at that time, and that had really taken over. Big part of my life there in winter and early spring of 2022.
So they've got a bunch of games that usually run in the 90 to 120 minute range, so they're a little bit longer. And they do work with education as a big part of their company, and the idea, I think it's leaning more towards the high school and above, but certainly some good, interesting games if you've got kids in that level that are interested in gaming, to have some historical games with mechanisms and things that tie back to reality.
Yeah, and Brian Meyer, the designer, looking for playtesters for an expansion. So I would say that's probably not just a fresh coat of paint. That's in the Board Game Geek forum, and that is all the way back in May of 2024. So I think they are well on their way to some new material for that game.
All right. So the next one, this is one that I'm excited about, and I think you should be excited about too. That is from AEG, and that is the new game from Phil Walker Harding, which is called Misfit Heroes,
Can't wait.
Is going to be launching on Kickstarter March 18th, I believe. And in Misfit Heroes, you are putting cards together with a trait and a character and a clear card that goes into a sleeve to make a completely unique hero.
Did you say Phil Walker Harding using a John D. Clare mechanism of card crafting from AEG?
Yes.
Oh,
hitting exciting. A lot of buttons, right?
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, this one was teased at Gen Con with a pin, and when Doug and I got home with our Gen Con stuff from Gen Con 2024, I held this pin up to my 9-year-old and I said, "Guess who designed this game? Rainer Knizia." Nope. I'll give you one more guess. Phil Walker Harding. Yep, you got it. So Misfit Heroes looks pretty incredible, and I can't wait to see it and play it and talk about it.
Yeah. So essentially, you're trying to collect these cards and put them together to score points. I got the impression, although without necessarily playing it, I don't know if they ever had it as a demo night or not, but kind of got the vibe of a 3,000 Scoundrels meets a Fantasy Realms type of thing, where you're collecting cards and those cards are scoring points based on what else you have also in your crew, as it were. So looking forward to learning and seeing some more about that game.
Awesome.
Then I stopped by I shouldn't say I stopped by. These are all in order, alphabetical order. So I did not go around the exhibit hall in alphabetical order. Oh, God, got to get over to All Play now. But I did see All Play, and they were showing off quite a bit of they've been having these Kickstarters with 4 games in a set.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of interesting ones coming out. And I think they're doing a really good job of having the amount of games in small boxes, doing it really well in a way that I think that the Tiny Epic series kind of missed out on. Where I always played some of the Tiny Epic games I played, I'm like, this just needs to be bigger. Like this is a great game, but it's too small and fiddly. These are great games in small boxes for All Play. They're reprinting Money. The game Money by Rainer Knizia, which I have the original one, which I really enjoy. So there's a new version of that coming out. I was able to play a game called Oddlands, which is a game of playing out square-shaped cards, very similar to a game like Nemalia. However, when you play, you're playing all into a central board, not your own. You have 2 or 3 cards in your hand. You play them out to the central area, and you can cover 1 to 2 other squares. And then when you play a card, you put one of your animals on top of a territory. So it kind of combined that world building with something like Sausage Sizzle, where you only have one time to score your alligator, and you put it down, and then each of those animals is going to score differently. Very similar, I guess, to kind of like a Cascadia, where if this alligator is surrounded by water, it scores more points. Well, that's awesome when you place it down, but your opponents are immediately trying to blow that up and make the water around their guy bigger. And
because only what the game state at the end is what counts? Is that
correct? Yes, not when you play it.
Nice.
So as much as I want to keep growing this desert for this animal, you're trying to shrink that desert, make your desert bigger. And so it's really cool with the spatial element and that kind of constantly changing, like, oh, do I hold on to this one where I have a little bit more control at the end of the game and you have to play your animal on the card that you played. So the whole middle of the board can't be filled in, and you're like, oh, well, this seems like a great spot. You would have had to place there early and hope that it worked out well.
Is that one you think you'll pick up and try when it's released?
I think it's got it's intriguing. Another one that I played from them was Alibis, which was There is a game, I'm trying to explain this, but essentially there is one, let me look it up here just so I'm mumbling and stuttering here. But essentially you get 2 words. There's a grid of cards out. I believe you get 2 words or 2 cards. Everybody around the table gets 2 cards. And then there are either 1 or 2 that are buried. And you're trying to give a clue out for which cards are yours. And so, for example, I think in the demo they had one that was like, they put down Applebee's and there was a card that said restaurant and microwave. And so everybody then is taking their own card and saying, okay, Michael put down Applebee's. I'm guessing his is restaurant and microwave. I know what mine are. I see what Dan's word is, and I'm thinking, and then you leave which one you think is the one that was left over that nobody got.
Yeah.
And then everybody reveals, and you score points if everybody's right, and you lose if somebody's missing. So it's kind of one of those cooperative ones that either you kind of just keep playing, but I thought it was a unique level of deduction without all of the banter between players of like, oh, Michael would have put this. You're kind of doing your own little board, which I thought was pretty cool. So there's a lot of stuff. Allplay has a lot of games coming out, so it's hard to keep track of not only their own stuff, but publishers that they're working with that they're also putting out.
Yeah, and they've started what you just said there, Doug, at the end. They've started to carry a ton of smaller publishers' content directly on their site, almost as almost like a backer kit or a game found in some ways, where some of the projects that will fulfill, then you go and you finish your order over on Allplay's site, which I gotta tell you, it's smart. They've gotten my money a couple of times. I went to we'll do confessions of board game collection here, right? I went not that long ago. I went to close out a Bitewing project that I crowdfunded. And I was like, this Reiner can eat you money, even though it has anthropomorphic animals. $19, and you're going to include it in the shipping for what I'm already. Okay, I'll take money. I'll take Lure. Those are 2 games I've had my eye on, right? And then I know when the other ones fulfill, I've got 2 more little small box games from Allplay. Well, why not? I think they've done some. Allplay to me seems to know how gamers think. And they're taking a long view to the industry in ways that I think other companies either haven't been able to or haven't cracked that code, right? If a game is one that I've looked at 5 or 6 times over 2 or 3 years, I might not buy it at Gen Con among the humanity with 3,000 other people. But then in the comforts of my own home later on, where I've got a little bit left in the gaming budget for the month, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
So,
moving on, Amigo, they have one huge game coming out this year, and that's going to be 3 chapters. And so I think they're putting a lot of focus into that one. And I think
anticipated game, one of your most anticipated games of 2025.
Yes, and I think you'll like it too. And it's a trick-taking game where you're drafting your cards for the trick-taking. You're scoring points as you play the cards. And then the cards that you end up, then the cards that you've played have scored. So it's basically 3 phases that all really work together well. So I'm excited to get that one to the table.
Gen Con release?
Actually, I think it's a May.
Okay.
And they were also excited. I believe that Bonanza is going to be carried in Target now, which is a big deal for them that they were excited about. So
way to go, amigo.
Arcane Wonders had a game that I believe Michael will be really excited about, and that is a game called On Stage. It also has some Japanese writing along with it that I don't know how to pronounce. However, I can explain the game. Yes. And in Board Game Geek, it is just listed as On Stage. And On Stage, there is a row of... it is a trick-taking game, but there is a row of performers that are on the main stage kind of components set up in the box. The number of, and they're different colors, different types of performers. Whichever color happens to have the most flowers, holding the most flowers on the stage, becomes trump. And when you win tricks, you can earn some of those performers. And there are some cards that will allow you to take those performers off the stage and move them to the back of the line. So trump could be changing throughout the hand, which is, so you play a card, I follow suit, but it changes who's out there, or I don't follow suit, but the card that I now played is now trump, is now the winning card, even though it's a lower value. So it's got some interesting things if you like trick-taking games on there. It's
so
kind
it's
of
a must-follow trick-taking game, but what can change, not to get too into the weeds of this, but what can actually change the trick or the suit?
So some of the cards have powers on it, similar to like Fox in the Forest, which may take some of the performers off of the stage. And so if that changes the amount of flowers for that type of performer, it's going to change what the trump suit is.
So is there an actual stage? This is the first time I'm hearing about this one, Doug. Is there an actual stage, or is it just cards? Boom, boom, boom.
No, it's a box. It's a box with meeples that stand on the stage. And those are what are indicating what is trump. And then as you win tricks, you can take those performers, which I believe are the points at the end of the game. So it's reminded me of Fox in the Forest with that kind of trump manipulation, but a cool kind of take that element of manipulating the whole world in ways that maybe you hadn't thought of as you're playing. It's like, ooh, this is a great card, and then somebody's like, actually, it's not, because this is happening, and now I'm going to win that trick. So it's one that I think that you'll enjoy.
I think I'm seeing it now in Board Game Geek for the first time. On stage, one word?
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
And you said Arcane Wonders is coming out with it. That's great. There's no embargo on that. You're good to say that because there's nothing on the Board Game Geek verse about it. So
I don't believe so. They let me take pictures.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, good stuff.
All right, moving along. Asmodee had a gigantic booth, as you can imagine, and so I'm only going to pick out a couple of games that I'm excited about. I saw a bunch of games. However, the Great Western Trail El Paso, which is a streamlined version of Great Western Trail. So it has a lot of the same mechanisms. How did they describe it to me? In a comparison, shoot, I wish I could remember. It was a game that got simplified down, and they used it as a comparison of like, if you liked this version and you wanted a little easier entry point. I can't remember what game it was, but they said that it strips down a lot of the mechanisms but has the same type of feel. So the track isn't as long. There's not as many buildings out there that people are, that are more kind of a centralized established board type of thing. So I'm excited about that. There's a Lord of the Rings Pandemic game.
You got to see that, huh?
Not really on the table. They just had kind of the box that you could look at. I don't think that they were demoing it any of the nights that I was aware of. I believe it's coming out at Gen Con as a Gen Con release for them. And when I say pandemic, it's not the exact, it shares mechanisms with Pandemic, but that you don't assume that it's literally just a reskin of Pandemic. Ticket to Ride and Catan are getting refreshes coming out.
What do you mean by that?
Just like new artwork. Like there's a 6th edition of Catan coming out that will have kind of updated artwork, and it will come with the trays and just some extra niceties.
Quality of life.
Yeah, just time to refresh the artwork and things like that.
What are they doing with Ticket to Ride?
Don't know. They just said that they were refreshing it, and I got a vague picture of the cover.
Okay.
So, with a big thing where it's like art not final, but just that they are updating it.
Don't hold us to this.
Yeah. And then the other interesting one that they had that was a game called Time Trouble, which is a cooperative game in which none of the players control. You are not one of the characters. Everybody controls all of the characters as a team, and there's four or five characters, and everybody has a hand of transparent cards with different symbols that move the characters. And you kind of plan, you're moving along a track, and you need to plan, okay, we want the pink guy to move to this spot. It'd be ideal if we got the green guy to that one to kind of maximize their abilities. You can vaguely talk about what cards you have in your hand, but you always have to play down one more than the number of players. So if there are 3 players, 4 cards will have to go into this central discard stack, essentially. Okay. But because the cards are translucent, I can put down a card, then Michael puts down a card. Your symbols may cover up some of my symbols. And so even though my card had 4 movement for the yellow, now yours covered it up with a pink. Now yellow only has 3, but maybe we got the 2 pink movement that we need. And then somebody else has to play on top of that, and you're kind of thinking, okay, if I rotate it and trying to play it out in the order, and then once you play the 4 cards, you basically resolve what you've done. And it's like, all right, well, this is only happening there. So I like the idea of that player autonomy to, I know what I have, I know what, and I didn't, the only thing I didn't get a sense of is if those turns have to go in order or if it's kind of a free-for-all that's like maybe I can play all 3 of my cards to make it work. I'm not sure on that, but the artwork and the concept seemed pretty interesting to me. That was called Time Trouble.
Tough to keep up with you here, Doug. You saw a lot. Where are we at in the alphabet for publishers?
Well, we're going to skip ahead some because there was I saw SETI from Czech Games Edition, which they're shortening that. They're just going to be CGE from now on. Okay. So that's a company-wide thing that they're just shortening up to CGE. SETI looks very heavy and complicated. So it was one that I was very interested in looking at because there are some that sometimes work for me, sometimes they don't. And that one looked like there's a little bit too much going on here with cards that
I need to see if the colors work for me. I'm going to try that out at Gen Con. I already know I'm going to do their demo at Gen Con and just get a feel for it and play around. So
they talked about their Arnak Adventure Chest, which is coming out. Some of that information starting to come out as well. Talked to Capstone, and they Clay from Capstone seemed to think that Galileo Galilei, who is by the game by the same designer as SETI, seems to think that is a little less complicated, and I agree. So I'm looking forward to trying that one out. Seemed to be a little bit more in tune with what I could follow. The other thing that's hard, I will say, of being at a convention like this or a trade show is you're getting so many 15-minute
they start to bleed, don't
elevator
they,
pitches that sometimes, like if it's at the end of the day, I'm going to be honest, there's a monkey clapping cymbals in my brain while they're talking, and you're just like, Well,
and that's where if you're there alone, it's really hard to absorb, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And if you have people you can bounce it off of, sometimes you can just look over and be like, okay, Doug is straight mouth breathing through this one. So I'm going to pay attention to what's going on because this game's more up my alley. And I know that definitely happens the vice versa of what I just said because I am a mouth breather. So it happens.
Well, and it all comes down to, it's like you really appreciate, as much as we talk about teaching games as being a skill and teaching to other players at the table, running a demo and doing a booth pitch are skills. And
especially if they're doing 65 to 70 of them in a day.
You see some that it's like do a really good job and some that maybe you wish were
Need
better. So that goes a long way as well. Stopped by DeVere Games. They had Transgalactica out on the table, which was coming in June, I believe. And that is pretty big. And Quorum, which is coming out in March, which is very much a point track game.
Yeah.
So it's not a bunch of theme, but a lot of points. So if you like climbing up tracks for points, you will probably enjoy Quorum. Talk to Manny and Gavin from Dice Throne, just letting them know how much we enjoy
just casually
their
name
games.
dropping that one in, huh, Doug?
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
How'd that go? Did you?
It's good.
You handle those things better than I do. I tend to scare people with enthusiasm. So
A little bit, yeah.
Went well, huh?
Try to be a little reserved. Stop by and talk to the folks that do the Dized app, just to let them know how much you enjoyed was it Andromeda's Edge that had one? Or
no, wrong. It was, I don't think they've done one for that. It was Elder Scrolls. Betrayal of the
that was
Second
right.
Era.
I
Yep,
did.
Good. You got it right with them.
I got it right with them.
That's good.
Yep.
That's good. Thanks, man. Good.
I talked to the folks at DV Games, who they do the Bang series, and they threw a game out that I'm interested in. Bonsai, which has already been released.
Yeah.
But I was talking to him about Bang and how much I enjoy the game, but it can go on for long, and there's player elimination. And so they recommended Samurai Sword, which is a retheming of Bang. However, it doesn't have player elimination.
Interesting.
Essentially, once somebody is eliminated, that ends the game. And then you're scoring your honor points. But similar roles, things like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Fireside Games has hopefully a game coming out in Gen Con. Things work out well, which is Ham Helsing Monster Hunter, which is a cooperative game based on a graphic novel that's very much in the same vein as a Dogman or Captain Underpants.
Not in the Castle Panic universe? Or
No,
did they pull this into? Okay.
Completely separate.
But that's the company I'm thinking of, right? Fireside?
Correct.
Castle Panic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And it's got some kind of card crafting to upgrade your character, which is really cool. Let's see. I do have one thing I can't talk about, so I'll skip past that.
Look at you. Folks, he won't even talk about it offline with me. All right, when that's how seriously Doug takes the embargo. Oh, you've already told me?
Yeah, I already shared it with you.
Okay.
Talk to Tim Fowers from Fowers Game. He's done Walkstar, Burgle Brothers, and he's got a couple of new games coming out. Run, which I believe is a sequel to Fugitive, which was a pretty cool 2-player game back in the day, and a couple of new games in his Word category. Hachette has Micro Macro Kids coming out in April.
That's awesome.
2 things that I really enjoy, which are it is giving you little clear green discs to keep track of the characters that you've found. So if you ever played if you've ever played Micro Macro, I think one of the first demo scenarios is this guy lost his hat. Where did it go? And you kind of have to trace back through his steps. And sometimes it can be pretty easy. Like when I'm playing with my kids, I have like fingers pointed. All right, this is where he was, and this is the next. This gives it green discs, which is ingenious and so simple. But the other thing is that instead of the little decks of cards, they have a book that you go through.
Yeah.
So each scenario is kind of a chapter in a book. So you don't have to lose track of, did we do this deck? Did we not? So I'm looking forward to that one coming out in April. A game that's kind of surprised me was Pina Colada Dice, which I really wasn't expecting, but it is a grid-based game in which you are rolling Yahtzee style to try and get combinations very similar to something like Roll For It. However, your dice don't stay out on the board. So maybe I'm trying to roll a 2, 4, and a 6, and I roll and I get it. Well, then I put my marker on that area of the grid. If I'm the first one there, I'm going to get more points than the second player there. And you're either playing until somebody gets to 25 points, I believe, 20 or 25 points, and you'll do a final scoring. Or if you happen to complete a row, column, or diagonal of claiming those spaces, you can win immediately.
Okay.
So it's that type of thing of like, ooh, I really want to roll into this because then I can win immediately. Or do I roll for that because if the game goes long, I'm going to need points and I get 4 points there. And you can also score extra points for adjacency. So that was kind of one that surprised me.
And that's also from Hachette?
Yep. They are going to be reprinting Celestia. So that was a game of the week.
That's awesome.
For us. So that game is going to be coming back out. They're also reprinting Cyclades, which is a Bruno Catala older Euro game that's coming back out. So I'm interested in trying that one. And they said that they've been having a lot of luck with Chronologic Paris 1912. They have a new one coming out. But it's the same designer of Turing Machine, which is a game I was interested in, but kind of got turned off by how complex people said it was. And so this is supposedly a lighter version that they're doing really well with, that has a lot of those same kind of deduction elements. Horrible Guild was showing off Railroad Tiles, which is a newer version of Railroad Inc. that takes it from a roll and write to
I have a friend who backed that one, so I'm really excited to play it. I've held off, but can't wait to see it.
Inside Up has a game that they recently released, which is called Perch, which is an area control game with little birds and nests.
That looks cool.
That I think you and I will both enjoy. I'm usually not one for area control, but I think the way this handles it works for me well. Saw the new version of Parks on the table. There is a regular version and a deluxe version. The new versions include parts of the expansions that were released in the past version, and it's a refresh based on no longer having the rights to the 59 Parks series artwork.
What'd you think?
It looks good. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely interested to. I feel like going with the deluxe edition is going to be better. They have inlaid boards and stuff like that. There's some more games coming out in the Creature Comfort line. Can't get into much more detail than that. Let's see, what else? Critter Kitchen is going to be coming out soon. If in retail, Kickstarters are getting their copies right about now. What else?
That's a lot, Doug.
They had Backstories, Alone Under the Ice, which came out last year, which they have a new one coming out, which is a little bit of a choose-your-own-adventure type of a game that's based on the decisions that you make. So depending on who you talk to, things will change. Potions of Azureland coming out in May, which I have behind me. I'm looking forward to playing. I think that's going to be a good game. They also had a game called Tempo Code, which is coming out for Gen Con for them, which is you have a code, a three symbol code facing outwards, and everybody else can see your code. You can see everybody else's, that type of thing. You're going to draw 2 cards, and you're going to give one to somebody else as a clue and keep one for yourself. And you kind of match up the cards, and it'll tell you how many, it has like that Wordle type of thing. It's like one of them is in the right space and is correct, or one of these matches your symbols and one does not. And it's very interesting because there are clues that you think like, oh, this will be terrible for them. And it's like, no, it's actually very helpful. So keeping track of that. Gunfights and Gambling was a game from Mid-Level Meeple that was a good team player game I'm interested in.
Finger gun? What is it called?
Gunfights and Gambling, second edition.
Okay.
Mighty Boards had Fate Forge Chronicles of Khan, which seems like a good hour.
People love that game, Doug. And I mean, it's like an 8.4 on Board Game Geek. I think they're just closing down a crowdfunding one now. It has so many things that appeal to me. It's just, limited by space and time. But that's one that I interrupted you. What were you going to say about it?
It's a dungeon crawl that plays in under an hour.
Yeah.
With fairly
campaign
simple
elements or no?
Yes. It's a story long game type of thing. But to be able to do a session in an hour, the setup doesn't seem very intense, and the gameplay seems pretty easy. So that was good. I demoed a game called Viking Raiders that did very well at the UK Games Expo in 2023, and somehow No, it's from NeoWolf Games.
Okay. I feel like I've looked at this one a few times.
They're trying to get something published in the U.S., but it was a really cool game. And obviously it did well at the UK Games Expo. It was the general Best Card Game People's Choice Award and Best Card Game Judges Award winner. It was really cool.
That's
I'm surprised
awesome.
Nobody's picked it up yet. So we talked a couple of weeks ago about importing games, so maybe.
Somebody will get it.
Pandasaurus had Castle Combo out, which I took a look at. Still want to try that game. And a game called Paper World, which is going to be coming out in Gen Con, which looks interesting. All right. Let's see. Moving on. Try and wrap through some of these quickly. There is a Sandcastles of Burgundy coming out from Ravensburger, a kid's version of Castles of Burgundy.
What'd you think about it?
It wasn't on the table, so
okay.
I just saw it there, and they kind of highlighted it. There is a kind of a more family-friendly version of Villainous coming out called Villainous Unstoppable. That kind of
I didn't realize that Villainous is not family-friendly. What?
I think just easing the idea of the asymmetrical player win conditions.
Okay. So simpler version of Villainous.
Yeah, all four characters will be playing very similar.
Got it.
In that game. So that looked interesting. Roxley Games is coming out. Their Kickstarter is just kind of being fulfilled for a new version of Santorini, which is an abstract kind of puzzly game.
Yeah,
that's
great
for
game.
2 to 4 players. They have a cooperative version of it coming out, and where you go through an expansion, where you go through scenarios. And the book that you go through is essentially the board, so you're not using the board from the original game. And I am
very cool.
Really intrigued by how that plays as a cooperative that I think has the potential to be really cool.
Yeah. Do you still have a Santorini in your collection, or
I have the New York version.
You do? Okay. Yep.
So Santorini was originally published by Roxley, then got picked up by Spin Master, a collaboration with them, and now came back to Roxley.
Okay.
So they're redoing it. Smirk and Dagger Games has a cool game coming out called Outfox the Fox.
Yeah.
In which there is essentially a high five list. The demo was the most annoying sounds in the world. So kind of think of a Family Feud type survey, and then the top 5 are on the list. The presenter then adds one more to the list, and the rest of the group has to determine what order they think they actually go in, and which one is the fake one.
It really sounds like Family Feud.
Yes, but what was really cool about it is that I incidentally demoed this with W. Eric Martin from Board Game Geek, and we had a small disagreement on one. What's nice about this, it led to fist fights. It's fine. He's recovering. He's doing well. Anyway, the thing that's nice about it is that you can basically double down on one and say, I think this one is really in the right position. And if you're right, you score extra points.
Interesting.
So everybody scores points.
Not cooperative.
Correct. But there's a cooperative element, right? So it's like you come to a consensus as a group and everybody's going to score those points, but you have an extra opportunity to score a couple extra.
Yeah,
so
we love gestures in our house, or gestures, however you want to pronounce. And this, to me, feels like it would fit right in line with that and Hive Mind and some of the other games that we've really enjoyed in our house. Yeah,
really good as far as that party style game with a little bit of bite to it.
Yeah.
Cosmos has some great games coming out. Australis, which seems to be the art is beautiful. There's a lot of art on it. Wonder how that'll look to your eye, color wise. But there's a lot of different mechanisms in there, but all on a family weight level. It is a dice drafting game as you're moving up a track. So that one looks really interesting. There is also the Crew Family Adventures. So it's taking the Crew, but making it into a family game and not necessarily it's kind of a trick-taking game, I guess. But that to me is one I'm really excited about because I love the idea of the crew and I like playing the crew. Very hard for me to get to the table at all. And if this is an entry point to that.
Group dependent, right?
Yep. And the other one is a game called Dice Words, which was really kind of caught me off guard. Usually I stay away from word games because if you play with somebody with a really good vocabulary, you're going to get trounced type of thing. But this is a dice rolling word game. There are 4 dice that are at the center of the table. You roll those. Those are bonus scoring letters. They're basically your multipliers. If you happen to use those letters in your word, you're going to get a multiplier based on how long your word is. However, you have to roll those dice in order to use them. You've got like 6 or 7 dice that you roll, and you can create words, and you get bonus points if it's longer words. But it goes so fast, and you're limited by what you roll, and it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, I had rounds where I scored a bunch of points, and rounds where it's like I could make the word dog, which multiplies 1 by 3.
So you have that choice of, is it worth it or not, huh?
Yeah, and because it was so fast, I didn't feel like, oh, I feel like a dummy. Like, you're just like, didn't have you get like two minutes to roll your dice and come up with a word, if that. And so if you don't come up with anything by then, oh well, move on to the next round. So that one really surprised me as far as a game that I usually don't care for. The Op had a game called Fountains, which looks really cool. There's a T-Witches, which is going to be their big Gen Con release. It's by Manny Vega, who did
I can't wait
Flamecraft.
to see that.
It's got some more moving parts than Flamecraft, is I guess what I'll say with that.
I'm not afraid of it. Bring them on.
Not afraid of it. Let's see. Thunderworks has Citizens of the Spark coming out around Gen Con.
We got to see a demo of that. If you like card crafting, combo-tastic games, that's a good little deck builder.
Well, not card crafting. It's jumbling a whole bunch of decks together and then playing with that deck.
Crafting, rather. Sorry.
Yeah. And then the last one I want to talk about, I'm really excited to try out, which is from Van Ryder Games. And these have been out for a little bit, but the Graphic Novel Adventures Junior, which are for young and emerging readers to kind of a modern take on choose your own adventure and playing a game out of a book. And the graphic novel adventures are essentially you're reading a book and noticing things and moving to different parts of the book, that type of thing. And so when they mention that they have a junior version, and when I've got a 7-year-old daughter starting to read and a 10-year-old that loves reading, I'm really awesome. Interested in trying that out. And I think, geez, the implications of this in an education capacity, sitting on a shelf in a classroom or homeschooling, could be huge. So those are my highlights. Hopefully that wasn't too verbose, but
slightly. But that's why we're here. And Doug, I mean, if you go someplace for a week, that's what you should come back with. Doug went to work for the podcast, and I'm grateful for it. Here's what will be interesting, though. I think a handful of those games, the nice thing about the hobby, you'll come back to the games in 3 or 4 years, right? You'll see it on a table at a regional convention. 2 people be playing it and be like, that's one that I was telling you about from GAMA when I went.
Yeah.
So although there's a churn and there is the hype and the hotness, there's also the long tail of some of the good games, right? Yeah. And it's great that you got to see them and share your experiences there. That's awesome.
And I think the hardest part is what you had just mentioned, which is the hype.
Yeah.
You have to
sort through it.
That everybody there is telling you how great their game is, how excited they are, when it's coming out.
And they should be.
And it's going to be great. Yeah,
but that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to just go right to our wallet. We're covering it.
Or that the hobby will receive it that way.
Yeah, sure.
For as many games as there are on the table 3 years from now still getting played, 85% of these games will probably disappear, unfortunately.
Oh, that's so sad.
So trying to filter that out and kind of get ahead of it, or find the gems in that 85% is something that I enjoy doing, and I think we do a good job of maybe the industry may have moved on from some games, but they are ones that we still want to shine a light on because they're still great games.
Well, and thanks for going.
Yeah.
Really, to take time away from your family, to take time off of work, and, to just go to cover the event and to see what's going on and to meet people and to, let folks know about the Game Schooler podcast. I'm grateful that you did that. So thank you, Doug.
No problem. I'm looking forward to having you on the trip next year. I think that'll be awesome. Hopefully. We'll see, right?
We'll see what happens. You never know what the future brings. I'd love to go, but it fits. Can't make them all. But if whenever it does fit in my calendar, I'll be there with you.
All right. So that is our wrap up of GAMA this year. Next week we'll be coming back with a fresh new episode. Not sure what we're going to talk about yet, but
we've got a lot in the queue. We're very excited. I think the next 10 to 12 episodes are going to be. They might be our best ones yet, Doug.
All right. Well, those are bold words. Thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.